Suffering Podcast.
Taking a trip into the mind of darkness can easily leave a hole in your heart. No matter what blockade or protection you put into place, hearing awful things will eventually take their toll. An attempt to heal may come at the price of your soul. The willingness to detach and disassociate to explore the nucleus and origin of an issue is a noble charge, hoping to bring some order to the madness and terror to the understanding, hoping to gain answers to the unusable questions. Peeling back to uncover can often reveal the madness that no one wants to see. But the cost of true knowledge comes from those brave enough to go face to face. An approach of grace and integrity may bring a solution to the worst offenses. I'm Kevin Donaldson, always here with Mike Falaise, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do here, and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content, and now you can join. And follow us on all social media so you can find out exactly what we're up to when we're up to it. On this episode of the Suffering Podcast, I have an opportunity to talk to somebody who has stared in the eyes of true darkness. And it's something we've never done on this show before, but I've always wanted to explore it a little bit. And tonight we have Dr. Dorothy Novitskie to talk about the suffering of a forensic psychologist. The things you go through and the things you have to deal with are horrible. And I want to talk about it tonight because while you do what you do, you still are a human being. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.
Before we get into anything, so a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody as police, and we certainly don't trust anybody as podcasters, but we do trust the guys over at Toyota Hackensack. So do me a favor. Go to toyotahackensack.com, let them find you a car, and also tell them the Suffering Podcast sent you. So, Dorothy, each week we take a question from our audience. This question comes from Snickers Car. What part of your day is the most peaceful? Now, I know day in and day out, you're hearing the worst of the worst, these awful things. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, look up what a traditional forensic psychologist does, and you'll figure it out. So your day can get pretty chaotic. So what is the most peaceful part of your day?
I think there's parts that are peaceful, and that's by design. I think I would say over the last 20 years of doing this work, I just needed to find moments of calm, moments of peace. And I would say definitely when I first wake up before the whole house is awake.
Are you an early riser or are you?
I'm an early riser. I like to have at least half an hour just to myself before everybody else is up, before my dog realizes I'm awake. So that gives me a chance just to get up, I'm not really a coffee drinker, just having some water, and be able to listen to a meditation, do some mindfulness, and just kind of get grounded right before my day starts. But I would say after that, my dog walks in between appointments are wonderful, right? Because again, it just brings me back to what is important, right? And watching something as innocent as a dog that's able just to enjoy, right? And be present and be just so happy to do something as simple as go for a dog walk, just again grounds me into what really matters, right? And that not everything is so troublesome and so dark.
Dogs are amazing. Cats are assholes, but dogs are amazing because there are really bad people in the world that will abuse a dog, and a dog will still love them. Okay, because a dog just wants you. It doesn't want what you can provide. It doesn't want, can you take me here? Can you take me there? Can you fix this in me? Can you fix that? A dog just wants you. And if you give a dog you, that dog will be forever your friend. And here's the other thing about dogs is dogs teach us about life in such a short, abbreviated time frame. They're puppies, they're rambunctious, they calm down, they become your best friend. And then you watch them later on in life, and then you have to deal with the loss, which is also an important lesson. It's just a hard lesson to learn.
It is, yeah. Agreed.
So like you, I'm an early riser. There's only 24 hours in a day. I don't sleep that much. And once the day gets rocking, once the day starts rolling, the chaos ensues. Okay. And there's always something that'll come up. You could have the best laid plans. Like I like going to the gym. Well, if I planned on going to the gym after work, well, guess what? got to get dinner, got to pick the kids up, got to do all this different stuff. So I have to create time within that 24-hour. And I know it sounds crazy because you can't create more time. You have to sacrifice something. So in order for me to have that peace, because like you, I am very similar to you where I need to step into my day. I don't need to start running. I got to walk into my day. So I wake up very early. I wake up at 3 a.m. because that is the time my phone blows up most of the day. That is the time when I don't get any phone calls. I don't have to answer any emails. Nobody else is up, so there's nobody to look out for or look after. So that is me. I can focus on me. I can do the things that I want to do and not be an inconvenience to anybody else. Because that's the last thing I want to do. I don't want to be an inconvenience to my kids where, hey, Dad, can we go do this? Can we do and then I don't want to be that selfish person. I got to go to the gym, or I got to go do this. I don't want to be that person. So I create time for myself. And how do I do that? I sacrifice sleep, sometimes to the detriment of my body, but it's all I got. So I make it happen, because that's the bottom line on that. If you want something bad enough, if you want peace bad enough, you'll find a way to do it. You just have to be willing to sacrifice something else, because there's only so many hours in the day. So that my morning routine is, without my morning routine, I'm a monster on most days, but I would be a really, really bad monster. So Snickers Car, thank you for sending that question in. Keep sending in your questions and we will try to get them on the air. So Dorothy, ever since finding out what you do, because I've known you for a while, but I never knew what you did. And we started talking and you told me a little bit about what you did. And I'm like, my mind's always working. My mind's always, I have a thirst for new information. And ever since you told me what you did and how you operate within your profession, I said, wow, that's something that I'd love to sit and talk to. And an opportunity arose, and here you are. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, how you grew up, where you grew up?
Sure. So I'm a product of an immigrant family.
Where are they from?
Poland. Actually, I was born in Poland.
You were born in Poland.
So since I was
What's it, Stolat? That's
still out, yeah, happy birthday.
Happy birthday. That's the only thing I know.
That's a start.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I grew up mostly in Morris County. So I've been here, even as an adult, right? I pretty much stayed. But I would say growing up, probably because of I would say that probably the trauma of the move, right? Kind of adjusting to a new country and new language.
What age?
I was 7.
You were 7, so you had already had some formative years in Poland.
I did, because I was going into 2nd grade at this point when we moved.
So you're fully speaking Polish. Did you have any grasp of the English language?
So my parents tried. We definitely took some classes before moving, but to be honest, moving and my first day of school was Halloween, which if you can imagine.
Do you have Halloween over in Poland?
Now they do. Back then they did not. So
wow. So you came to this country.
It gets better.
These people are out of their mind.
It gets better. I didn't have a costume, right? So the teacher, Mrs. Nolan, in her best effort, she put me in a Christmas tree costume from like some Christmas play they had at the school. So I was mortified, right? I was like, as a kid that loves Christmas, I'm like, this is awful. Why am I? And then they're making us walk around the school in circles, right? It seemed like the most asinine thing you could do for little kids. So I went home and told my parents, I'm never going back to school. Yeah.
Wow.
And the next day I went back to school.
Well, if that ever happens, and anybody that's listened who doesn't have a costume, you take a page from the Wednesday Adam book, okay? And that is, go to school just as you are right there and say you're a homicidal maniac because they look like everybody else.
This is good.
That's the way you do it.
If you can speak the language.
Yes. So you're in this foreign country with this strange custom that you don't know about, and you're like, all right, well, when in Rome, I guess.
I guess, yeah.
Oh God.
So that was a start. And we stayed. This was in actually Bergen County. We stayed there for a couple of years and then moved to Riverdale, Morris County.
That move. What did your parents have work here? Is that what?
So my dad was here a few years before us, and he's an engineer by trade, so he was already employed and established. And they decided this was in the late 80s, right? So if you think of
you're communist Poland.
Right. So there's like Cold War sort of status, right? So there was fear of,
Hmm.
just, I mean, things getting worse than they were at that point. So my parents thought this was the best option. They had the proper paperwork and all that, and they were able to do it.
So I'm sure being over in Poland when you were a little kid, you heard things about America. Were they
Oh, sure.
were they positive
They were
things?
very positive things.
It's a freedom, which listen.
Yeah.
I've never lived in a communist country, but I don't hear it's. I hear it's not that great.
Yeah. Well, Poland has moved past that at this
Correct.
point, but yeah, it definitely. I have definitely flashback memories of things not being great as far as what you could buy in a store, right? How long people had to wait to get like a loaf of bread. I mean, it was like
Toilet paper is a commodity.
Right.
So
As
you
well
were
as
fully
COVID.
prepared for COVID.
I was so ready for COVID. Right? It's like not my first rodeo. Yeah, but it was definitely, like I said, a traumatic move for me. And then not knowing the language, I found a lot of solace in books. And that's probably how my path was formed into.
What books did you gravitate towards?
Probably books I should not have been reading when I was 8 and 9. So whether you think of Stephen King, like It books, or like John Douglas kind of books, Helter Skelter, right? That's what,
Really?
so my formative years, right? So between 10 and 12, I read all those books. So my interest definitely peaked even before like Megan Kanka and all that was going on.
So you think so? You planted a seed in your head that okay, getting into the mind of some craziness. I mean, there's no Stephen King book that talks about sunshines and rainbows, but in Helter Skelter. Wow, you read Helter Skelter twice. Whoa,
Yeah.
whoa. And how long did it take you to pick up the language?
Oh, it was quick.
It was quick.
Within 6 months, I was fluent.
You were really? And do you still speak Polish fluently?
I do. My grandmother that lives with my parents, she had some English, but she's almost 95. So that language.
She's still with us?
She's still with us.
I'll tell you,
Yeah.
those Eastern Bloc people are hardy people.
Yeah, it looks. She lived through the Nazi invasion, right? So she can live through, all the medical things.
So she was there because all the death camps were in Poland, or most of them anyway.
Yeah, Auschwitz. Mhm.
So she lived through all that stuff, and she
She
saw that stuff.
Mhm.
Did were they religious people, or when the Nazis came in, they're like, no, we don't believe in anything?
I think a lot of it was survival, right, and trying to help those that you can help.
Did you ever document what she went through and what she saw? Because those stories, like your grandmother, are going away.
Mm-hmm.
Day by day, we're losing hundreds and thousands of them.
Of course.
Did you ever sit and talk to her about that?
I talked to her a bit. Definitely, she has a recollection of watching tanks, going down the streets, and knowing that she was 8 at that point, right? So knowing bad things are happening, but she was a kid, right? So she was a young child, so it's a lot of it was just fear and again, help what you can, and then keep your head down, don't make noise.
Can you imagine having vivid memories of that nightmare?
I think keeping that in perspective, right, compared to my trauma of being a Christmas tree, right, at the same age is just it pales in comparison.
I would respectfully disagree with you because that incident that you went through at 7 years old, being a Christmas tree, was no, I know it sounds humorous now, but just think about this. Take your 7-year-old self and drop you in the middle of, say, the Soviet Union or Russia. It's Russia now. Drop yourself in the middle of Russia. I don't speak the language. I don't know the customs. I don't know the culture. You're already a kid and you're trying to figure stuff out on your own. There's no anchor for you, especially in that environment. So just because it's not living through the Nazis, it's every bit as important to you.
Sure. I would agree with that, right? And that's probably something that I say often in my line of work, right? That it's, comparing, this assault to another assault, or, it's the person's experience out versus the factual pieces, right?
Well, that's why women are more appropriately in that field, because if it was a man, men always fight for trauma trophies, right? So one person will say, well, I had this happen to me, and their buddy will say, well, I had this happen to me, and I had this happen, and they'll just keep trying to one-up each other because they're always trying to see who has the best, who has the best, the worst of the worst. But that's why I always believe, and maybe I'm wrong with this, I always believe that women have a stronger grounding in the field of mental health, because they don't do that stuff. That women tend to approach things with more compassion than men. Men are a little bit harder on that.
I would agree 50% of the time with that. And honestly,
That means you would disagree 50% of the time. What is that?
My glass is half full usually. I would say that because it really depends on the personality structure of a person, right? That if I'm by nature more of, a narcissistic kind of presentation, right? I want to feel like I'm in control of you, right? I want to feel like even if you're feeling pretty crummy, if I'm feeling okay, then that's a win for me, right? So I do think, unfortunately, in my line of work, there are a lot of people that do find some satisfaction, if you will, of working with people that are hurting, right?
More
People
that are worse off than them.
right.
So I come across a lot of people like that, and they'll know what my trauma is. My trauma is very public. They'll know what my trauma is, and they'll say to me, "Yeah, but I feel bad even talking about this because I didn't go through what you went through." And I said, "No, you don't understand. No, that's not how this works. It's like the difference between a woman who is repeatedly raped versus a woman who was raped once. Well, it's the same thing because that's her perspective and that's this one's perspective. It's the same thing. Assigning values to those, I just think it's a dangerous thing.
Agreed.
Yeah. So you move on. You
Mhm.
go to high school. You assimilate into
Sure.
American culture. Was there ever did you ever go back to Poland?
I have. I actually went back. I haven't been back in many years, but when I was
There's a lot of Polish people over there.
in Poland. Some, right? It's funny because similar to the U.S., it's such a mix of cultures at this point that it's not like not that I fit the blonde, blue eyed anyway, but everybody is not blonde and blue eyed in Poland. That there's a huge mix of people, which is actually nice to see. But when we left, that's really what it was. I wasn't um, accustomed to anybody that didn't look like my family.
It's a shame too because Poland has such rich history. They've been around forever, and there's all these different places in there that it's a very foreign atmosphere. America is very new. We're 250 years old. That's all we are.
Right.
But they are thousands of years old, and things are built up there. It's not I've read enough. I've obviously never been there, but it's not uncommon for you to see a church that's 700
right.
years
Like
old.
Cathedrals, right?
Yes.
They have castles, palaces.
It's pretty cool stuff, and I like that stuff. So you were reading Helter Skelter, you were reading Stephen King, and what is it? Say, let's take Helter Skelter because that's a fascination to me. What is it about reading a book like that sort of piqued your interest? Are you ready to enhance your skills and provide the best care to those who need it the most? I'm Kevin Donaldson.
I'm Sherry Alsip. Our trauma-informed training is here to help, and we've been traveling across the country delivering this essential need to departments and organizations of every size, shape, and makeup.
We come to you with on-site training so you don't have to worry about travel or scheduling conflicts.
This isn't just a class, it's an interactive experience. You'll learn directly from subject matter experts who teach from a victim's point of view, putting you in the shoes of those who have experienced trauma.
This approach allows you to understand trauma on a deeper level and to better serve the individuals you work with.
We'll guide you through new interview techniques that prioritize a victim-centered approach, ensuring safety and empathy in every conversation.
And for those of you in law enforcement or other fields, our training includes post-credits, giving you the extra added value and recognition for your commitment to professional growth.
We offer references upon request to show just how effective our training can be.
Don't miss the opportunity to improve your understanding of trauma and make a real difference in the lives of those you serve. Get in touch with us today by going to sherryalsip.com and let us bring trauma-informed training to your organization.
Together, we can make a lasting impact.
There was no fear in reading that. And I think a lot of it is meant to be fear-inducing, right? We're supposed to be shocked. We're supposed to be like in disbelief, right? For me, it was more of how did this happen, right? And I think that was my hook.
I want you to read a book. All right, I'm going to give you a book to read. It's called Chaos by Tom O'Neill.
Okay.
So Tom O'Neill was hired by Newsweek in the late 90s to write an article for them about the 30th anniversary of the Manson murders. And he started going down this rabbit hole. He started going. He never published the story. He could not make the deadline because each time he would uncover things about Charles Manson. It's the CIA and Charles Manson and the secret history of the 60s or something like that. There's a subtitle to it. But it took him 20 years to write this book. And there was a therapist, Jolly, I want to say Jolly Wilson, or it's not Jolly Rogers or something. It's something like that.
Okay.
He was a CIA therapist, and what they were doing is they were experimenting on people. There's enough proof out there, and if you read the book, you'll understand. There was enough proof out there to say that Charles Manson was under control of the CIA, and they were watching him because he was definitely part of MK Ultra, which they were giving LSD to these people. He was released from federal prison in '63. He had been picked up multiple times for felonies. He's a federal parolee,
Right.
and he would get catch and release. They would never keep him because they would get a phone call saying, let him go. Even after the murders, they caught him all at the Spawn Ranch, and with drugs, underage girls, stolen cars, stolen credit cards. Biggest raid in LA County history. Everybody was released within 3 days. Why? All right. Yeah, you want to read that one because this therapist is also the same therapist that visited Jack Ruby after he shot Oswald.
Right.
And after he got out of the cell with Jack Ruby went completely insane. So pretty interesting book. But so I like you, and this is what piques my interest about what you do now. I like you have is it a morbid fascination with it? I don't know if that's the right term. It's just I want to try to understand because everybody's reality is their own.
Sure. I don't know if it's morbid. Maybe I just like to think it's not morbid. But I would say between Helter, Skelter, Signs of the Lambs, and the Megan Kanka murder.
The Ed Gein murders, because that book's about Ed Gein, who was he's the one who sewed the skin suit.
Right. That's really what I think just really piqued my interest into the human psyche.
You want to know why?
And it's not just why did you do it? It's just how did that person get to that point, right? Because this may be a Pollyannish view of my world, but I don't believe people are born bad, right? I don't believe people are predisposed to commit these heinous acts, whether it's murder, whether it's sexual murder, with sexual assault. Yeah, I don't think we are, except
you're trying
programmed.
to unlock the human genome is to say, okay, what is the one stick that was poked in there to trigger this response? What makes a person take another person's life? What makes a person commit these horrific crimes?
Of course, especially, and I think for me, and I do think Megan Kanka's murder, I think I must have been, that age, 14, 15 when this happened, right? So I think for me, it was more of this is such a young child. And we knew this person was previously offending as children. How did this happen, right? And what happened that it allowed this man to have access to this kid? So I think that's where my interest really kind of fused into, this is potentially something I want to do, and I want to be Clarice Starling, right? So I thought I would, be in the FBI and all that stuff.
So we had a guy in here, sat right here, Kenneth Strange. He was at Quantico. He was an FBI agent. He was at Quantico when they were filming that movie, and Jodie Foster was going through Quantico, and he goes, she wouldn't talk to us. She just sort of sat in the front of the bus. She never did anything.
So cool. Yeah, I was almost there, and then I never went to my testing, my interviews.
Well, the FBI you're tailor made for the FBI. You would have been Clarice Starling. I
would have been, but I missed all of my appointments because I had to take my tests for my doctoral program. So I said, I'm sorry, can I reschedule? And they were like, no. I'm like, oh well, I can't.
So did you when you got out of high school, did you jump into college thinking that this was going to be your career path?
So no. So I started off my undergrad as a computer science major.
You were looking for money.
I don't know. I thought it was something that would make me, maybe it was like imposter syndrome. Like it validate me that I'm smart enough to do this, right? That it seemed like something such a challenge. I was always an overachiever in high school.
Do you do puzzles?
I love puzzles.
See,
Yeah.
that tells me a lot about your personality. And what you do now it's a puzzle.
It fits, right?
Yeah, it fits.
Yeah, no, even in high school, every AP class you can think of, I took. AP Stats 1 and 2, AP Calc 1 and 2, AP Physics. It's just like there was no reason for that, but I felt like if I don't, what would happen, right? I'll miss out on something important, and I didn't. But now, going into my undergrad, I very much thought I would do this. Luckily, I would say, and I put that in kind of quotes and a question mark next to it, is I got mono my freshman year.
Oh,
So
who are you kissing?
I'll never tell. And I could not, I couldn't keep up with my math and science, my classes that were for math and science majors, because that was obviously a good idea as well. So I had to transition a little bit. I was able to keep up with whatever calculus I had at that point. And I just really focused on psychology. Actually, that's not true. My criminal justice classes, those professors were very understanding. They let me do a lot of work from home because I missed 6 weeks of the semester. So they helped me get through the semester. And then when I came back to school, I had such a good relationship with the professors. My first major completed was administration of justice, and then it was psychology. And I never went back to computer science.
You found like you fit in that direction?
I fit in that direction. The judge that was there, Judge Hoffman, he was a fantastic mentor, and he really exposed me to the court system. I worked with a medical examiner as an undergrad, like sitting through autopsies.
Where'd you go?
Rutgers in New Brunswick.
You didn't go up to New York with Dr. Bodden, did you?
No.
We had a guy in here that interned at the New York Medical Examiner's office, and he interned with Dr. Bodden.
Yeah, no, this was all through New Jersey State. But
so what'd you think of autopsies?
I thought they were fascinating until, and I was, if I was standing here, the body was right there. I mean, I was,
because I've been to a lot.
I was fine until some of the fluid got on my pants, and I kid you not, I said, I think I was always like a dissociative state that I could just kind of look at it from a.
Yeah, you have to remove yourself from humanity for a moment.
Very much so. So I think it was very much a cognitive process for me, that it was just fascinating to see all these organs that I've studied, that I knew, where I was like, oh wow, and this is how they.
What is the first thing you noticed when they cut open? Well, like the first thing that just like went wow, like because that's. Mm-hmm. I asked this question to people who have experienced autopsies for a reason. I could tell you exactly what mine was. So. What is the first thing you remember from an autopsy?
I mean, the biggest thing I remember about the first thing would be, this is, and I hate to get kind of gruesome on this, but it was opening up of the skull, right? The kind of the pulling back the hairline, right, and then cutting and then removing the brain,
moving the face down here.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe it had a little bit of cannibal, right? In that there's the later movie where he is actually. They were sitting eating dinner, right? And he actually cuts the.
Yes, yeah. Oh, that was the reboot,
right?
Sort of.
I think it was Hannibal. I think it was actually that
Ray
movie.
Liotta that he did it to.
Yes. So it almost had that flavor to it. But again, I just found it fascinating because I realized in that moment that I very much was dissociating enough to pay attention, but also not have an emotional response to it. Right. But at the same time, when it crossed my personal boundary, I said, okay, I am not going to medical school. That is not happening for me.
The first time I saw human fat out in the air, like you can look at it in a movie all day long, you can watch video of it, but the first time you see the true bright yellow of human fat, I'm like, oh my gosh. That's crazy looking.
It's fascinating.
It was because again, I remember my first one was a 43-year-old man, and he was there like he had a heart attack, so he was there like this, and boy, but some of the humor thrown around in examining rooms, oof. That's why I tell everybody: if you love them and you can avoid it, don't have anybody autopsied. Yeah. But that's interesting to me because when you're able to look at something like that, which is horrible on the surface, but as a pure science experiment, you're again getting back to that puzzle. You're unlocking a puzzle that you've only read about in books. Now you got hands-on history. Right,
absolutely. And I remember the first one that I sat through was actually, it was a much older gentleman. I think he was probably close to 90. And he had committed suicide via asphyxiation. So it was the goal of Autopsy was to see, was there something else, right, underlying.
Check the airway to
yeah.
see if
Yeah, all that. So, it's just a very vivid memory for me.
And the one that I remember most, there was just a little bruise right here on a woman,
Mm-hmm.
and when they cracked her chest cavity, her heart exploded, and it was
wow.
just a mess in there. But that was, I'm like, I was always fascinated by him. You know, listen, the smell, it's not great.
It's as I experience it right now in this moment. Yeah, not
Yeah.
great.
And it's also a smell you'll never forget.
It is. That is it.
You know,
it was until you mentioned it. Yeah. It's right back.
it's a smell you'll never forget. So you're learning all these different things. You're learning your way in this world, and you're finding your place, the thing that draws you. Because I think that's what makes a true professional, is you have to be somewhat attached to it and drawn to it. I was attached to police work. You know, I was attached to doing fatal motor vehicle accidents because I loved the math involved in it. It allowed me to use my brain a little bit
Sure.
more. So when did you actually commit? Was it when you actually committed before you got out of college? Was it just to be a psychologist, or was it to be a forensic psychologist?
So I would say my path, undergrad was, I think, very formative for me, because I had connected with, in addition to the judges and the medical examiners, I was also interning and working with the prosecutor's office in Middlesex County, and the investigators there were phenomenal. They took me on the door-to-door notifications for Mega's Law, and they taught me how to do tiering, right? So I was exposed tiering for Mega's Law.
I've never heard that term. Please, please let me know what that is.
Mega's Law, right? Which is the notification and registration
for sex offenders.
For sex offenders. Again, not every sex offender is subject to that. It depends on the statute, right, and what they end up pleading to. But ultimately, there's a tiering process in that.
Like tier 1, 2, 3? Is
tier
that
1, 2, 3?
I'm for some reason I'm hearing tier. I'm like, what? I gotta cry. I don't get it.
You could cry. It's okay. But tier 1 would just be somebody who, most likely not a hands-on offense, probably a family victim, probably no penetration, right? An older person, so not a child, like under the age of 10, right? So there's specific factors that go into it. It's a mathematical kind of process. And that person, if they're on the registry, it's only known by the police department. They're not on the website, right? There's no notification. A tier 2, which is the higher level, right? That would be police department. It would be schools. It would be anywhere where children, like within a certain radius, congregate. So, preschools, libraries.
They're limited on where they can live.
There's that too, but also those places have a notification of them, right? They have their photo. They know this person should not be coming here, especially alone. If they're with other adults, there's supervision and then safe. And then tier 3 would be the door-to-door notification, right? So within a radius, you're literally walking door to door saying, here's a flyer of this individual who lives in your neighborhood and this is what he committed. So that was.
I've actually gotten one at one of my places of business a long time ago where I'm like, oh, that's pretty interesting. But the funny thing is every parent, when they move into a neighborhood, they always look up the website. They always. But that website, what you're telling me is certain people aren't on there because if it's a minor offense. Not minor, but you know what I mean.
Right. So certain people are not on there. I would say a lot of the people that have potentially been subject to Megan's Law for the last 10 years, they have maybe petitioned, right, to be removed from it. And really after 15 years, they can petition to be removed from it altogether.
Do your personal feelings ever weigh in on stuff like that? 15 years of being, after 15 years, the ability to be removed? Knowing what you know now, and I know we're sort of jumping around here, but knowing what you know now, knowing the psychology behind that pretty well. I mean, listen, you're an insider when it comes to this stuff. Do you have a personal opinion on that you sort of keep to yourself, or?
My thought would be this: if a person has, served their time, right? Let's say they did a 5-10 year, sentence at even at Avenel or a regular state prison. They've been out in the community for 15 years. They've complied with everything. They've been through treatment, right? They've been, no violations of any kind, right? No dirty urines, never out of place, right? Never have curfew violations. Then I think they should have that chance to be removed, right? Because of something that occurred 25 years ago, and now, maybe they're 18 when this happened, right? And now this person is, 53, right? And their life is completely different than it was when they were 18, I do think a person should have a chance to.
The reason why I'm asking you that is I have my personal opinion, right? I have my personal opinion, but I am not locked into what you're locked into. My personal opinion would be like, no, you know what? Listen, you did something awful, and you know, some things stick with you forever like glue. But here's the thing about this is you're smarter than me in this field. You have more information. You have more education with this stuff. So I'm going to lean into you and your opinion. Your opinion matters a little bit more, a lot more than mine when it comes to stuff like this. And if you say that somebody can, in fact, walk the straight and narrow, I'm going to tend to listen to that a little closer.
Well, think of it this way, right? If, again, somebody was 18, right? And their girlfriend was 14, 15, right? And
Jimmy Page.
right. And parents could get upset, right? And they file charges. And now this person is charged with sexual assault. There was, in theory, right, consent, even though obviously somebody who's 14, 15 cannot consent legally. But in theory, a relationship, right? No force. Everything on the surface was okay. Does this person deserve to be, on this registry, that far down the line, right?
That I can understand.
And I'm saying that because I think one of my struggles in my field, and I do evaluations for Megan's Law removal or removal from Parole, Supervision for Life, PSL. And it's for people that are 15 years post whatever sentence they had received. I do think that the specifics of how a person came to be charged, what happened, and what's happened since has to matter, right? And having done the clinical side in terms of the treatment for this population, both in the prison system as well as out, right? I do have the buy-in for the effects of treatment, right? And the treatment isn't so much to change what a person likes, right? If somebody is aroused to violent sex, right? Or if they're aroused to 2-year-old kids, right? No treatment is going to, like, we can't pray, take that away.
You can't solve the problem.
Right. But the goal of the treatment is to help you manage those urges, right? And find healthy sexual outlets so that you can be
It's kind of like an addict who finds a different outlet for a drug.
Absolutely. Right. So I think once you see that in play, right, you see that a person is able to, right? And they also know that if I do have this urge, right? And I know my triggers. I know that this is when normally I would go to the computer and I would start looking up, whatever, right? Ultimately, that's how I go down this rabbit hole. I have my keepsakes, right? I have the people I can reach out to and say, I'm struggling. I call my therapist, right? And I say, I'm having a really hard time.
Mm-hmm.
Help me kind of, right? So if they're able to use those avenues, those outlets, then I don't see an ongoing kind of like punishment, if you will, at that point to be beneficial.
It's a tough one for me. It is a tough one for me, and it's something that I constantly, because I do believe that everybody has a chance for forgiveness. I do. Some people have to show a little bit more than others in order to be forgiven, and that it's a sticking point for me. From personal experience, it's a sticking point for me. But that's why I like talking to somebody such as yourself who has the real world experience and has seen what can be done. If it had never been proven that somebody could be rehabilitated, but you were always hopeful, I would say, well, you don't have any proof that people can be rehabilitated. But the way you're speaking, I'm assuming that you've seen it in action.
I've seen it in action, and I think what it's important for us to also realize that most people that get charged with sex offenses, whether or not they serve a sentence, like behind bars, they will be back out in the community.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I'm saying that because there is this kind of fallacy, and I see this a lot of times with my clientele or even attorneys I have to explain this to, that yes, there is a state prison that we have specific to adult males with sex charges, right, which is the Adult Diagnostic and Treatment Center in Avenel. There's also the Special Treatment Unit, which is on the grounds of Rahway, which they're actually back to back, like backyards. But those are two different facilities. Avenel is specific to serving a state sentence. The STU is for civil commitment. There's only about 500 men that are civil committed at any given time And this facility has been open since the late 1990s. And some of these men have been there since the late 1990s, right? They've never been released because of the gravity of their offense, because of their ongoing arousals, despite 20 plus years of treatment, right? They're still.
So just like in everything else in life, there's certain people that can never break
Absolutely.
those things.
Mhm.
So you find this interest in this field and you start entering into this field. You become a doctor, you become, you get all this stuff. At some point, like, you get into this field and you get that eye-opening experience, that one case that you draw and you're like, whew, I don't know what to do, because you have different criteria for seeing a patient. Like you're not a regular psychologist where I want to go see you, I'm having some issues, and you just meet me face to face. And I don't know, do you see people like that? Just like a regular?
I have a very small, I would say, clinical caseload, which consists of chronic pain patients. And really a lot of that is.
I'm glad you came in. I got a pain in my back. We gotta work.
We could do some pain reprocessing therapy for that.
Right.
But a lot of that is trauma focused work, right? Which makes sense, right? That our bodies are responding to triggers, and it's neuroplastic pain, right? It's not structural. It's something that's healed, but potentially either stress around me is really impacting how I'm feeling physically, and all of a sudden pain that I had 20 years ago is happening. Oh wait, I just got fired from work. And I'm right. So it's really, again, neuroplastic, and it's really trauma based.
It's amazing. And I know the value of that, what the brain thinks, you can think yourself into.
Absolutely.
Into anything.
So in many ways, it's not that different. That's different from a lot of the work I do with the sex offender population and my other forensic populations that I see.
When you first got in there 20 years ago, when you first got into this field, you're idealistic. We all are idealistic when we first start in our profession. And then you get that one case where you just go, oh my gosh, this is real. What was it? When did it become real for you?
So this is actually probably before I even started my doctoral training. I was a master's level student in John Jay. And I was at the facility in Kearney, which was at that point the STU, the Special Treatment Unit, was in Kearney in addition to the one in Rahway. And I came in bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, excited to work with these civilly committed sex offenders.
I'm going to change things.
I'm going to change the world. And I remember walking into with another, with an actual therapist walking in, and this, in my memory, he's like 5 feet tall. This petite man walks up to me, who was one of the residents there, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, hi, I'm Dorothy Novitskie. It's so nice to meet you." He's like, "You're here? Are you a student?" I said, "I'm a graduate student." "Yes, nice to meet you." He said, "This means this place is never fucking closing." I'm like, "Great." So and then so that was it. And then another person came up to me, like trying to be, I guess, polite to me. And he shook my hand, which I learned at that point why we should not shake hands with.
Oh no.
And so that was a very, very similar to my experience with the fluids on my clothes from the autopsy.
Oh my gosh.
It was a very, very real, right? And I remember that experience of like blood draining from my face, and thinking, okay.
He had it on his hands?
He had it on his hands. And I remember thinking, okay, you cannot cry right now. I wanted to cry or run away, right? It was like, that's true.
If that happened to me, I'd cry.
Right? But it's also like, imagine being in
male fluids on the hands, people. Everybody gets that, right? Everybody understands what we're talking about, because that is one of the grossest things I ever heard.
Imagine being in, these were groups held in trailers, right? So like the men would leave their housing facility, whatever grounds they were on, which was actually on the grounds of Hudson County Jail, and they would go into the trailers for the group. So it was just myself, this other therapist, and 10, 12 men.
You're outnumbered.
I'm outnumbered, right? And I can't show weakness, right? I have to say, okay, that was not appropriate, right? Go grab something.
Has anybody got a sink?
Right. So that was very real to me at that point, and just a level of the boundary crossing and manipulation.
I got to be honest with you. So I've had people in here who have had some serious, heavy duty trauma. I've had people that have experienced lost limbs, sexual assault, homicide. That might be the worst thing I ever heard. I'm not kidding you. That might be the worst thing I ever heard, because it's so filthy
it's a personal violation. That's what it is, right? It's a personal violation without it being as as dramatic as a sexual assault, right? Or as like oh wow, right? This is more like an ooh, right? It's like that moment of, again, just a personal violation, and again, taking advantage of a really young kid. I was 22, right? Walking in, super excited, right, and just like diminishing like that innocence at that point, right?
You enter into that trailer, on fire, and then you just hear that like they do in TV. Wah, wah,
Oh,
wah.
awful. And I'll just say one more thing about that facility, because I was there for about a year. I was training with this female psychologist, which she was one of the top ones in the state at that time, in this field. And I learned a lot from her, what to do and what not to do in these settings. And what I mean by that, it's not where you think I'm going with it, Kevin, just so you know. She was very pregnant in the beginning of my externship there. She comes back 8 weeks post pregnancy and comes back in leggings, stiletto heels, full makeup, full hair, inappropriate all around, right? And again, 22-year-old kid saying, what is this, right? This is not kosher. And very, very needy, very flirtatious, right? With the population. I find out a few years later, because I was applying to work at Avenel. I'm like, oh, this person would be fantastic for a reference, because she was, again, the second top psychologist in the state. She had been arrested for having ongoing sexual relations with one of the residents in the facility. Was found like on the boardwalk with him when he was out on furlough. So, lessons for me, right? That just became so.
Did anything in your mind say, well, if she can fall victim to that, because they're manipulated, these people are wonderful at manipulation.
Of course. I think I was angry with her because what I could see almost.
She betrayed your trust too.
Well, that was the thing, like telling me what to do and not to do. But then I'm watching this woman that was wearing revealing clothing. And again, I'm not one to judge a woman by what she wears, right? I'm not that, oh, well, she asked for it. But what I'm saying is, you know where you're working, right? You know your audience.
Mm-hmm.
There is a level of expectation of how you present, right? Because what we put out there is what people respond to, right? And with their own misperceptions.
There's boundaries that you just don't.
That's the thing, and I was angry with her. I wasn't sad. I was angry that this is because she obviously just had a baby, right? So she was married, had a bunch of little kids, and I'm like, this is the decision you made.
So I know in the police world, when an officer gets popped for DUI,
mm-hmm.
the majority of the police officers around and go, oh, look at that idiot. They ruined their career. Yeah. Nobody asks why he was drinking.
Mm-hmm.
You have this incident in your field. Nobody asks, did anybody ask why she was looking for this attention? It's an easy get, right?
Of course, yeah. Of course.
She was lacking something.
Of course.
Just like the sex offender. Why did they do this? Well,
mm-hmm.
this woman, why did she do this? What was she lacking? Was she looking for attention?
And interesting enough, she was then labeled as the predator, right? Because in the field of psychology, right, we, in our ethics, right, we cannot have sexual relations with patients.
And it happens all the time.
It happens all the time. I mean, this is something obviously I've seen over time as well. But
you're at an elevated position.
But you're with people that already are a bit more maybe hypersexual, right? A bit
mm-hmm.
more responsive to different stimuli, right? That we put out. So this.
Do you think she was turned, or do you think she went into the field with having something in there?
So I think this goes back to what you were saying in the beginning, right? How women are better predisposed to do this kind of work compared to men. I do think for her it was more of a personality disordered kind of presentation, right? I do think she probably found working with this population to be stimulating for different reasons.
Intoxicating. You're getting attention from men.
So much attention, right? And for somebody like me, who I went, oh, right, this is disturbing. Who knows how she may respond to something similar?
There's a lot of other guys out there besides the ones that are in lockdown.
Right.
Well, there was an incident in the place that I worked. I can't really say specifics, but it was an adult woman sleeping with a 15-year-old boy. Her husband was very busy at work. He was all about his job. And the psychology of it's real simple to figure out. Okay, well, the husband's not home. and she needs attention. Who better to get attention, sexual attention
Sure.
from a 15-year-old boy who lives, well, I shouldn't say that because I got a 15-year-old boy. Who they live and die by their sexual hormones.
Sure.
So he's going to give her all the attention. So it was gross, but it made sense. Like I can wrap my head around that.
Right.
Wow. I'm going to tell you what, that's horrible. So you see all it, like.
So this was over 20 years ago, right? This is my introduction to this work. And I walked out of there, Kevin, thinking I still find it fascinating, right? I was troubled by how hopeless really the men at that point were, right? Because these places, they have a hearing once a year to see if they have mitigated their risk enough for consideration, right? To start like furloughs, right? So it's like, there's no end in sight, right? So for me, it's really like a piece of that human condition, right? That they're not sentencing you to death, right? They're saying there's a chance at some point, but what does that look like, right? So again, and like I said, most of these people, right, never make it to those facilities, right? They go right into the community.
That's a hard thing to keep going back at when you're working, because you always have hope that you're going to make a difference, that you're going to solve something, you're going to figure something out, and that's the thing that keeps you going back to working every day. But if you have that where your mentor, your instructor is doing that stuff, at some point it's got to weigh on your psyche a little bit. Like, am I really just spinning my wheels here? Am I doing my time? Like, what is this?
So fast forward at that point, about 15 years later, I was working at Avenel, right? I was the clinical director at the facility. And two things I learned very quickly. Everything I already had some of that from the early experiences, but again, what I put out there, people respond to. One, consistency in my presentation physically, right? That I would always dress in a similar fashion, right? Always slacks, a blouse, jacket, same hairstyle, right? Same. I never made a point of always being consistent, right? To not have
you want to look
attention,
professional, but not
have it. But
it's not like you're going out for a night on the town.
Well, I'm not looking at anybody say, "Oh wow, you look nice today." I wasn't looking for that at all. And I remember one time I couldn't find my normal eyeshadow or something silly like that, and it was like a shade darker. And an inmate came up to me and said, "Oh, you look nice today." And I said, "I'm sorry, why would you say that to me? That's not appropriate, right?" He goes, "Oh no, you're wearing brown eyeshadow instead of gray."
Well, these guys are locked down all day.
Absolutely.
And they got nothing else.
But for me, right, that thought was, okay, doesn't feel good, right? It's not.
Right, for her, so I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So for her, that was intoxicating
Right,
to her.
you're noticing me, right?
Right, I'm being seen.
To me, I don't want to be seen that way.
So you went the other way.
Mm-hmm.
But that's good because now when presented with that opportunity, you're not going to jump. Even though you are this doctor and you're dealing with all this stuff and you're committed, you're all into your profession, you still have a personal life to live. And now you have to go from hearing about somebody doing something to a child to going out. You're a young woman going out and saying, hey, you go to a bar with your friends or go out to eat with somebody you're dating, and you have to start living that life. How in the world do you disassociate with yourself and leave work at work? Because as much as everybody says they can do it, there's always a little piece that comes with you.
I think the benefit of working like an hour away from home was
an hour drive.
Was wonderful, because I would listen to books on tape. So I would make a point of getting in my car, right? And it was almost like well, I don't think I have many OCD tendencies. It was like I would get in the car, I always have my hair clipped up, remove the hair clip, right? You just kind of like you see like on the movies, right? Like, okay, put my Waze on or whatever GPS was at the time, put on my audiobook and start driving, right? So it was just completely.
You get into the fantasy world of the book.
Completely checking out from everything there. That I made a point of not checking my work emails the minute I got in the car, right? They knew that if there's an emergency, call me, don't email me, like I'll answer. But anything else, I'll respond to tomorrow, right? So it was more of like really having those boundaries and again, very pointedly getting into my car and shifting from, Dr. Novitskie to Dorothy.
I think it's a very useful tool. I was good at it and I was bad at it at the same time. I had a 10-minute drive home, 15 minutes drive home, and certain days were better than others, and I would drive around.
Okay.
I would drive around, but there was always some, like, and I lost a kid, right? So I would drive around, and no matter how long I drove around, I had to eventually go home and walking in the door. When you walk in the door, there are some things that you bring into that door. Some things in the back of your mind. You might not verbalize it. How do you say, like, hey, don't, I had a rough day. Is that something that you do?
I've learned at this point, whether I'm working from home, right, and I have a bad court day, right, that a judge is just being, abusive, right, on the bench, or I come back from doing an interview with somebody where I just felt like kind of gross in the interview, right, and I have those, right, and again, it's fascinating because they didn't do anything, right? It's not like those guys from 20 years ago. They might still have, maybe they'll shift a certain way, which I understand what's going on. Or
Oh my God.
or they'll just say, or look at me a certain way, right? Or say there's something about it just feels overly sexual, overly, again, kind of crossing boundaries without no physical contact, right? So I very much I'm aware of it, and I tend to schedule those appointments where I still have time before everybody comes home,
Mhm.
right? From work, from school. If it doesn't work that way, and I happen to get home, or I have to pick up people from school, I will very much say, I had a really rough day. If I'm a little off, if I'm a little cranky, if I'm a little quiet, you didn't say anything. I'm just still thinking about.
It's amazing you have that awareness to be able to do that, because most people don't, right? So I used to just say, you get that question when you walk in the door, how was your day, right? And I know you deal with this to some extent. How was your day? It's fine. It's fine.
Hmm.
While I thought what I was doing was protecting the people at home, I was burying myself deeper and
Sure.
deeper
Yeah.
and deeper. And eventually it'll come out, right? It'll come out, not what happened, but the aggression, the anger, all
Right.
that stuff will just come out in the most unhealthy fashion. Looking back, listen, I'm 50 years old, so I have a lot more intellect than I did when I was 25.
Sure.
I should have said, give me some time. Just give me some time. I had a rough day. I'm not ready to talk about it yet. And then I should give the Reader's Digest version. I shouldn't tell them everything, because they didn't sign up for what you do. Your family didn't sign up for what you do. But I think it would have been a healthier way of dealing with it than the way that I dealt with it. I would just drink myself silly. I mean, that's pretty much what I did. But that's amazing. Like, I have my hats off to you for being able to, for having that awareness to be able to verbalize it, because I didn't have that.
I think doing the therapy, as far as being the provider and working with people on even their traumas, right? Of how do we express, how do we notice, right, when something feels off? How do we notice that we're like dissociating, checking out, and we're not sitting through an autopsy, right? We're dissociating because we're just stressed, or we're scared, or we're just really sad. What do we notice? Like, what happens first, right? So I think doing a lot of that, and again, going through so many trainings and teaching people to pay attention to their bodies, it's, you learn by doing, right? And I do a lot of that work with myself as well, right? So I notice it.
You're very good at it. Okay, so I knew you for years and didn't know what you did. Like, you never wear it on your face. Cops, you could tell a cop a mile away, right? We wear it all over our face. We wear it on our bodies. Listen, we all got the same things. We all got tattoos all over, the
Right.
silicone ring band,
Right. You all dress the same, yeah.
the grunt style T-shirts. I know the game, and I have all those things. But you do a very good job at hiding it, because it wasn't until, I got talking to you a little bit that I found out what you did, and I had trouble seeing you in that role, because that's how good you disassociate yourself with it, and it's a gift. I'm giving you. I know it's a backhanded compliment, but I'm giving you a compliment with that stuff. because the stuff that you see should never be, or stuff that you hear, the stuff that you see should, not everybody can hear that stuff. I don't, it's fascinating to me. Like, you are a psychological study in and of yourself, of how you go time and time again, listen to this stuff and then still live a normal life with hope and dreams, and you love people, and because that can just, seeing that stuff can just wipe it right out.
It can. And I think what you're saying, I made a point of being very present, like in my kids' lives, right? Being very present in my family's lives, whether it was volunteering or coaching or running CCD classes, right? That I wanted to be. And maybe part of it was because I saw people that had offended doing some of this, right? So it
Ooh.
allows me now to be in those roles, right? And almost like protect those that potentially, may not be protected, right? So I very much.
With coaching, I imagine your profession helps you out. Now, coming from the past that I have come from, it has made me a better coach, because I can see things in kids where maybe they were acting this way when I first met them, and things have changed, and you got eyes on them. You can identify those little changes and what happens, and then you can start looking into it a little bit, look over them a little bit.
Sure. I think that, but also being present and seeing how adults are interacting with the kids, right? That I'm a true believer in allowing children to have their own personal space, right? Have their own physical boundaries. And I remember even when my kids were much younger, somebody saying, "Oh, do you want me to hold your child?" Somebody I've never met, right? And I said, "Why would you want to hold my child?" Right? It just seemed like an odd thing. Like, I would not ask a stranger. Like,
Yeah.
it's one thing if maybe I have 20 kids with me, right? And one kid is and a good Samaritan says, "Can I help you?" Versus, what a pretty little girl, "Can I help?" I'm like, "No, I'm good. I'm good, thank you." Right? So I think that also was my awareness, and I think that's also helped me to teach my kids, right? To notice certain things. Like, somebody will say, "I don't like it when this person says, 'Oh, you're so pretty. You should just, if you smile more, you'll be even prettier.'" I don't like that. And I said, "I don't like that either."
Mm.
I said, "You smile when you want to smile. You're always beautiful," right? So it's one of those, like, I think even those kind of messages, right? I'm very aware of it.
You've seen patterns.
I've seen
And
absolutely.
even if the patterns, even if you're seeing something that doesn't exist, you still see those patterns.
But I'm also teaching, whether my kids or my kids' friends, or I'm guiding my friends that are parents, right, of how to address these things, how to keep your kids safe, right? How to notice if something doesn't feel right, pay attention to it, right?
Mhm.
Again, it could be harmless, right? Because some people just may not know how to communicate with kids, but it
Oh.
doesn't make it okay for them to be uncomfortable, right? Children should not be the ones responsible for us feeling okay.
On an off topic, when people do find out what you do for a living,
Mhm.
like, "Hey, do you got any advice for me?"
Mm. So much advice, right?
Oh my God. I see it from a different side, because when people found out I was a cop, they'll instantly tell me about a ticket they did.
Mm.
Or it's either that or, "Hey, I got a friend of mine who's a cop in Louisiana. Do you know him?"
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh,
700,000 cops in the world. I know them all.
I get the same thing with being Polish, right? "Oh, do you know whatever ski somewhere?" I'm like, we are all cousins, obviously. It's like
Poland's a small country,
such
right? There's like 10 people
such
there.
a small country,
Yeah.
right? There is a lot of that that I do get. It's just weird, or people will. A lot of times, people that I just meet, right, before they even know what I'm doing, they'll start just telling me their stories, right? And I'll listen. I mean, I'll listen to people all day long. Might as well just keep on listening. And they'll say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'll tell them, like, "Oh, why didn't you tell me?" I'm like, at what point would I have said, "Oh, by the way, this is what I
Yeah.
do for a living. Like, here's my invoice," right? It's like,
Well, maybe you just have that presence about you that, okay, this is a safe person. Maybe that's,
maybe, but I do get a lot of that though as well. In addition to, "Oh, do you take new patients, or can I send my husband to you?" I'm like, "No, I'm good."
well, I think the things that you do are fascinating. Okay. The 20-year psychological experiment that you have been involved in would curl most people's hair. And you've been able to navigate it. It seems like you've been able to navigate it very successfully. and disassociate yourself and still have a normal and whatever a normal and regular life looks like,
Sure.
while still attending to your patients, while still doing your job effectively. And my hat's off to you, because listen, I could sit here and talk about it all day. I'm like, well, so what's that? What's that? Because a while ago, I had a gentleman that was going to come in. I talked to you about it, where he was a child sexual predator, probably one of the lower level tiers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fascinated to talk to him for the main reason, because I wanted to see, like, why. Like, I wanted to ask that big question, why. It's that puzzle that I'm trying to figure out, just the same way you're looking at that puzzle. And I'm always interested in this stuff, trying to crack that code. And I think that's, am I wrong by saying that's your life's work?
It is. It's right. It's how and why, right? And if we know that we're not supposed to, what still allows us to do it, right? That's really the piece, right? And if we have that information, how do we change it, right? How do we get you safer?
Could that would be the cherry on top of your career, if you were able to uncover, hey, if they got a freckle on their shoulder, that's
a telltale sign.
Then all of a sudden you come into a minority report type of thing.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd want to go down that.
Because we all want to protect people. We all want to especially protect children, especially those of us that are above board. And but you're actually making a difference in that field, and my hat's off to you. So we are coming to the end of this thing. Where can our audience find you?
Yeah, it's just NovitskyPsych.com.
NovitskyPsych.com. It'll be in our show notes. I think we need to have you back in there one day and just go through this and do a deep dive into the mental instability of a child sexual predator. I would love to sit there and listen to that, listen to you go through what you've learned.
Yeah, there's so many different avenues and so many different subtypes, if you will. So,
I'm looking forward to it. So we end every show the same way, because the things that you've witnessed, the suffering that you've witnessed, the suffering that you've ingested, talking to these people who've done the worst of the worst, if you haven't learned anything from it, it's really a wasted opportunity. You know, that's what my cup says tonight. It's wasted opportunity. I believe there's a lesson in everything. So all that stuff that you've witnessed and ingested in some way and able to get past, what has that suffering taught you?
Should I reference my cup?
Sure.
This too shall pass. No, I think it's really, I think that is a part of it. I think that a lot of our stress, a lot of even our darkest moments, they will pass, right? And the same thing is with sexual behavior, with addiction, with depression, with any anxiety. These things will pass, right? And we know that once we habituate to that discomfort, we can come above water. So learning just to ground ourselves and be able to sit through it, know potentially where to ask for help when it feels just like that tidal wave is just becoming too strong, right? We can't come above water. We'll be that much better for it and that much faster, but things do pass.
And eventually when they pass, here's the great thing about when they pass, they become a strength, not a weakness. Because while you're in it, you feel weak as hell, and you feel it is just a giant weakness inside of you. But when you move past it, those weaknesses become your strength, just the same way your strengths become your weaknesses.
Sure.
Yeah. So, Doctor, I appreciate you coming in. This was fascinating. I'm so happy I got a chance to sit and talk to you about this, and I think there's a lot more that we left on the table. So thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.
And that's going to do it for this episode of The Suffering Podcast, the suffering of a forensic psychologist with Dr. Dorothy Novitskie. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned. Toilet paper is a commodity. Maybe everyone has a chance at redemption. Not everyone is suited for a certain profession. Leaving work at work is probably one of the best gifts you can give your family. And if something doesn't feel right, and this is the most important thing, if something doesn't feel right, pay attention. And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to go to popple.com, put in the code TSP20 for a 20% discount on your digital business card. Follow us on all social media. That's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Clapper, LinkedIn, OnlyFans. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson, and of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.